Hi everyone, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you. If you're new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and if you're very familiar with the series, welcome back. I am going to preface this video with the fact that I am filming this after finishing the final Changeling live show, so I'll leave that linked on the screen. If I appear to stumble over my words, it's because I've been talking a lot. This is my reading week from the 22nd until the 28th of August. I read 7 things this week, not including a couple of things that I read for my last reading vlog, which was my Kindle Unlimited reading vlog. I will also leave that linked on the screen. That went up last week. But yeah, it was great. I read 7 things. I read a total of 1,783 pages and my yearly reading total is 328 books. Because there are 7 things, I'm going to try and be brief so that this video does not end up being super long. The first thing that I read this week was Like Lovers Do by Tracy Livesay, which is the second book in her Girls Trip series. This is a really fantastic book and series. I've really enjoyed both of them so far and was part of my Read Digital TBR for August. It is the relationship between Nick, who is a surgeon, and she has this plan of what she's going to do with her career. And she is just about to head off to the internship that she really wants to pursue that is very hard to get into, when she has a run-in with one of the interns at the hospital where she is working. That causes her to be reprimanded because he runs off to daddy because daddy has money and this kid doesn't like to be told off by a woman, let alone a woman of colour. As a result, Nick is given some time off to avoid any complications, which she's very resentful for, but she turns to her friend Ben, who she has been renting a room off, and he's a really good friend of hers. And as it turns out, he is about to head off on a trip with his friends, and he finds out that his ex-fiancée, who he has moved on from, is going to be there, but that she has been going around saying things about him. And when Nick tells Ben about the problems that she is having at the hospital, he offers to speak to his parents, who are both very influential doctors, and get them to put in a good word for her. In exchange, Nick offers to go along on this trip with him as his fake girlfriend in order to mitigate anything that the ex-fiancé might be doing. This was really fun. It had some of my favorite tropes in there, from fake dating and only one bed and all of that sort of stuff. I really like how strong a character Nick was. Ben is a real sweetheart as well. Their complications come in the form of Nick not wanting to compromise her career for a relationship, which is very relatable. But overall, I had a really great time reading this. And then I read Takedown by Jess Anastasi, which is Texas Heroes Book 1. Jess Anastasi is an Australian author who I found out about because my sister knows her sister, as it turns out that way. So I thought I would give one of her books a shot. It is an small town romance between Danny, who is a mechanic who comes from a family that has a history of domestic abuse, and it is his relationship with one of the town deputies, a new guy called Jake. The book opens with Danny on his way home, and he comes around a corner and runs into a car that is parked stationary in the middle of the road. And as it turns out, the driver, the occupant of the car, is already dead and has been dead for a while. And so the first responder on the scene is Jake. As it turns out, after this encounter, a whole series of crimes start happening within the town, and they seem to be throwing suspicion on Danny as the perpetrator of all of them. But Jake doesn't believe that's the case, and Danny and Jake end up becoming close, although Danny doesn't want to reveal that he's gay to the people in his town, let alone his family. So there are a lot of complications around that, and there are content warnings in this book for homophobia and also domestic abuse and violence towards family members. This one wasn't too bad. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with this series. I do have a couple of other Jess Anastasi books to try, including some sci-fi romances, which I'm very intrigued by. But this was an okay book for me to start with this author. Always happy to read more Australians. And then I went on a Talia Hibbert binge fest, basically, and I read her Ravenswood series, which consists of 3 novels and 1 novella. The first book is A Girl Like Her, and it features an autistic heroine who ends up falling in love with her next door neighbor. The basic premise of this is that for many years Ruth was in a secret relationship with sort of the town golden boy, who, as it turns out, is not quite so golden. And while he was seeing Ruth, he was also dating another woman called Laura. And the way that Ruth finds out is that basically this guy announces his engagement to Laura. And then the town finds out that there was something between Ruth and, I've forgotten what his name is because he's not a nice person. Everyone thinks that she was the one to instigate it and that she has caused all of these problems. And so she feeds into a lot of those rumors and basically stays out of town, stays out of view. And all that's good and fine until she meets her new next door neighbor, Evan, who is a local blacksmith. He's ex-military, and he is very intrigued by Ruth. This is very much a grumpy sunshine. Ruth does not like people very much at all and would be quite happy to stay at home in her pajamas, and in fact most of the times when she leaves her home she's still wearing pajamas, and Evan just finds her charming. And Evan is the most sunshine of cinnamon roll heroes. He is just amazing and I loved him. I thought I would stop at this book, but then I didn't, and I spiraled and read the rest of the books in the series. Book 1.5 is Damaged Goods. This is actually the relationship between Laura and someone else. So spoilers, at the end of the book, Laura wises up to her now husband's issues, and she's also pregnant. And so she leaves Ravenswood and goes to this small beachside town, which has always been a haven for her. And while she's there, she runs into a man that she knew as a child, and his name is Samir, and they had a brief romance over 2 weeks when they were teenagers. And when they run into each other, sparks fly and they rekindle that relationship. So it's very much a second chance romance. This one does have cheating because Laura is technically not divorced in this book, so be aware of that going into it. I'm not someone who would typically read a book that does have cheating like that. She is in the process of trying to divorce her husband, so that made it a little bit easier. But also the way that Talia Hibbert wrote it, and also knowing her future ex-husband the way that we know him from the first book in the series, made that a little bit more palatable. I did really like that novella though. It was very short, very easy to read, and it was nice to see some of the periphery characters from the first book in the series. The second full novel in the series is Untouchable, and this is the relationship between Hannah, who is Ruth's sister, and Nate Davis, who returns to town. Nate is actually the older brother of the hero for the third book, and he is a single dad and widower, and he's returning to the town because his mother is sick. And in the first book we knew that Nate was trying to come back to the town in order to help out, but he needed to wrap things up, and obviously it's a little bit trickier when you're trying to upend the lives of not only yourself but also 2 kids. When he comes back to town, he is in desperate need of a live-in nanny so that he can continue to do his work but also have someone there for his young kids, whose names are Beth and Josh, and they are absolutely delightful kids in this book. He's having no luck finding someone appropriate, and then Hannah's name comes up, and Hannah loves working with kids. It was her career until one decision led to her ending up with a criminal record, and so now pretty much no one will hire her as a result of that because criminal record. However, Nate remembers her from growing up, and he doesn't particularly care about the criminal record, and in fact he has one as well, which has something to do with protests and things like that. So he hires her, and the two have a really strong connection. And the one thing that I really liked about this book was how it really delved into the idea of power dynamics, because he is her boss and he is very cognizant of that. And even though he wants to pursue her and she is interested in pursuing something with him, he's always conscious of the fact that he holds a position of power over her. And so there are a lot of great discussions around that in this book. The other thing about this book that was really interesting is that at one point it comes up that Nate is dyslexic and that he has figured out ways to work around that, which I thought was really cool. And Talia Hibbert is just really good at incorporating little hints of diversity that are just part of who the characters are rather than making it the central plot line. Also, it does deal with the idea of depression. Some of the characters have insomnia and are on medication as a result of anxiety, depression, and all of that sort of thing. So it's all woven in here and it's really, really great. The one that I was really interested in reading was That Kind of Guy, because the hero of this book identifies as demisexual, and as that's how I identify, I'm always on the lookout for books where that is represented. And this one was fantastic. I really, really loved it. So this is an age gap older woman romance between Zach Davis, Nate's younger brother, and Ray, who is a new woman in town, and she is introduced in the second book, and we find out that she is divorced. She's come to town. She's very mysterious. She has scars on her face, and she's sort of a scandal for the small town of Ravenswood because she doesn't really care about anyone else's opinions. She also has a gorgeous dog who is huge and apparently looks like a teddy bear, and I loved Duke. Anytime Duke was in the scene, I was just hard eyes for dogs, honestly. At the beginning of the book, we know that Zach has had a history of sleeping around, but at the start, we find out that he really hasn't been doing that for the last 6 months, and he himself is thinking through the fact that he's finally settled on how he identifies and why he was doing what he was doing. He has a really great relationship with Ray. He thinks that she's great, they're friends, and she is a writer and she tells him the stories that she's creating. And then there's one night where they go out with friends and she's had a really bad day. She's got some news that's really upset her and they decide to go for a walk afterwards and she's really drunk. She propositions him, and as he's just come to the realization that he doesn't want no-strings sex, he actually wants and craves that emotional connection, and that he's not going to sleep with anyone without that. He rebuffs her quite strongly. And then the cool thing about this book is how these characters communicate, because they do actually talk about it a couple of days later when they're sober and they explain what's going on. He talks about why he reacted that way, and Ray reveals why she ended up getting drunk in the first place, and it's because she is nominated for a book award and she's about to go off to a convention where she's going to see her ex-husband, who has done some things, guys. Anyway, it comes about that Zach proposes the idea that he goes with her to the convention as her new boyfriend, as in a fake dating situation, to throw off her ex-husband and to give Ray a bit of a confidence boost. And he offers to do it because they're friends and he wants to help her. And so they start to go through with this, and then of course they get to the hotel, there's only one bed. Fake dating and only one bed. Hidden my tropes, guys. And it becomes clear as they're spending the weekend at the convention that Zach has started developing romantic feelings towards Ray. And she is the same. But she is really conscious of the fact that he is here under the pretense of pretending to be her boyfriend. And so she doesn't know if what he's doing is just acting or real. And he doesn't know how to convince her that it is. So it was delightfully complicated. And these two just had such a great dynamic. I really, really loved this book, and I think it's my favorite of the series. And the final book that I read this week was not a romance, it was actually a crime thriller. This is The Housemate by Sarah Bailey, which comes out this week here in Australia. Sarah Bailey is the author of the Detective Gemma Woodstock series, which I read a couple of years ago. There are 3 books in that series. She is a Melbourne-based author. This is set in Melbourne. We follow the main character, Ollie, who is a journalist. And very early in her career, she covered the Housemate homicide, which was 3 university students who lived together. They were friends. One ended up dead, one was missing, and one was convicted of the murder of the first girl. And we open with that at the beginning of the book, and then we flash forward to 10 years. So this book takes place from 2004 to 2015, and there are flashbacks throughout the book. So in the future, Ollie is now working for a different newspaper. She's a print journalist, and that's what she loves to do. She's currently married to a guy named Dean, who was someone that she had been in a relationship with many years earlier, while he was in a relationship with the lead detective for this original case. But then he married that detective and their relationship stopped. We find out that sometime between this case and the present day, the detective Isabel has died, and so he's left with 2 children, and sometime after his wife's death, he rekindled his relationship with Ollie. At the beginning of the book, Ollie finds out that they think the missing girl from the Housemate homicides case has turned up and that she's committed suicide. So she's put on the case with a young reporter who works in the tech division for the newspaper and is devising a podcast for the newspaper. His name is Cooper, and they're sort of forced to work together, which is not something that Ollie particularly wants to do, because Cooper is very enthusiastic and I loved him a lot. As the two begin investigating, they begin to realize that this case is bigger than it had ever seemed, and that perhaps the person who has died in the present day is not exactly who they thought it was. This was super twisty and turny, and I did keep turning the pages because I just couldn't figure out exactly what was going on. There's a lot of things in here, including a possessive partner who is very controlling. Ollie doesn't necessarily take the best care of herself, but she's very passionate about her job. There are deaths of characters, beloved characters, in this book, so be aware of that going into it. There is a lot to do with corruption. There is a lot to do with secrets and lies. Obviously, it's a crime thriller. This book does talk about infertility and surrogacy issues throughout the book. It does talk about child trafficking, child pornography, and then your just general death, murder, etc. sort of stuff. So be aware of that going into it. The really cool thing in the present day, we get the timeline of events unfolding over the course of about a week. The actual conclusion happens on the 17th of September, which is my birthday, which I was like, oh, I wonder if it's actually going to get up to that, which was kind of cool. My only one gripe with the book, and it actually doesn't change anything to do with my thoughts of the book, it's just annoying, is that the kids in the story go on school holidays on the 11th of September. School holidays in Melbourne never start as early as the 11th of September, ever. That is a week too early for Melbourne to go on school holidays. But that's just a me gripe. It is not a book gripe. It's just That's a technical fact. All right, so those are the books that I read this week. In the comments, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up. Otherwise, feel free to share something that you have been reading over the last 7 days. If you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave the little animal paw print emoji down in the comments to represent Duke, the awesome dog, in That Kind of Guy. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.